My name's
Thank you.
Donna Moodie. I'm the Executive Director of the Eco District and also the Executive Vice President of Community Development here at Community Roots Housing. And my background is kind of a small business background. I own and still own a small restaurant in Capitol Hill, kind of on the cusp of the Capitol Hill Central District area. So kind of have had a foot in both worlds for much of my time in the city, and also served for quite a while on the Central District Forum for Arts and Ideas board, and I'm good friends with its original founder. So have always kind of been involved in like local, super local politics and civic activity. And then I also work with our LURC, which is the Land Use Redevelopment Committee for the Central area. And we meet regularly, and as a result of working with the Eco District, have started to become involved in the Capitol Hill LURC as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I love your restaurant, by the way.
Thank you.
I go to Marjorie's every once in a while, and I just think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
So yeah, what are, if you wouldn't mind, like identifying some of the goals that that you've been using to address equity issues in the Capitol Hill Eco District work?
For me, I think one of the biggest issues, which I was informed when I was interviewing for the position, was that we had a steering committee that was very committed and very passionate, but kind of lacked a diversity of community, kind of lots of different levels of diversity. And I think that one of the things that I noticed, as well as many of the steering committee members had also been on for about 10 years plus. And so we were never, I love everyone on our steering committee, so it was never a goal to move any of them off, but maybe to bring some fresh ideas, some fresh minds, and also broaden the perspective beyond just the environment, but to also include social justice, particularly social environmental justice, because we feel like that's an important thing. And also just to address that until we raise some of the quality of life in general in our community, that we can't really address the environment. So that should be a job that every environmental activist takes on. Like, we have to improve the quality of life so that we can broaden the camp of people that are fighting and working towards improving our climate, and in long-term goals, like all fighting together to improve the quality of life for everyone. So that was a big sentiment that we had. And then we had COVID, and then we had, the racial reckoning that we experienced. So all of those things fed into just kind of the path that we were actually already on. So we've been really fortunate, and we've added 4 new board members, all with kind of diverse backgrounds, many kind of climate fighters as well. So that was a really great win, I think, to introduce to our current steering committee some new folks that had not just diverse backgrounds, but also a real passion for the environment and for protecting it, and also really big community investors. So they're people that have like lived in the neighborhood or work in the neighborhood, are committed to making our neighborhood a better place. So a natural feed into our public life planning.
Just a side note, I'm curious what were the equity goals that really came forward during that time, this summer, during the racial reckoning that you referred to? Like, what did you see coming forward during that time?
I think what I saw a lot was that it was actually really interesting in Capitol Hill in particular. I think there was kind of a paradox happening. Here we are having a Black Lives Matter movement. Suddenly the voice of people that represent that movement, there's a platform for them. Everyone wants to hear from them. We start the Chaz that turns into CHOP. And I think for a lot of Black activists, there was a moment of questioning, maybe a little bit of is this still our movement? Are we supposed to be here? And I wouldn't say that there's a monolithic answer for that. I think you could get a room full of Black Seattle residents and hear as many different opinions as you had residents in the room. And I also feel that it was really interesting. I think it made some people who felt kind of great about CHOP or Chaz originally kind of step back a little bit because they felt like that maybe the platform was being shared. And then also this sense when you get really deep into it, which is, I think, in some ways incredibly controversial to opine on, but I often wonder if, some of the youth that were killed in the violence that kind of erupted, if they were white youth, everyone was questioning, would the sentiment be the same? Would there be forces that be that would kind of shut it down, give order to it a little bit more quickly? Are we squashing people's right to speak up? The police are the point of the protest. Um, how are they managing the group that are protesting? And just for me, participating in the Sentinel event review and actually being in the room and talking with the police, the inspector general, and community leaders, we keep coming up with this sense that, um, you know, we just see examples of racism within the police force on a regular basis. And until we start addressing that, we can't really resolve some of the bigger issues.
Thank you so very much for that. I've been really curious and not had a chance to talk to anyone that's really been in the thick of that. And so, yeah, thank you so much. Um, I guess one of the other questions is about governance and how you've seen how the Capitol Hill Eco District has organized around um, the stakeholder groups and the relationship with the city agencies.
Mhm.
And how's that worked for eco districts?
I think for us, it's been a really interesting journey because I think one of the maybe strengths that I had coming into this position is that I had already served on several mayoral commissions or councils. So I had good access to City Hall, but also we were questioning a lot of the behavior and the actions of City Hall. So having that access is great, but it's often not so great if you don't agree with everything that they're saying. And then you can also use it as a platform to voice that opinion and to speak up. I'd say the the department that we probably had the most interaction with was parks, because we were asking them, what's happening in our park? Like, why is it closed? Why is there a sense that when it's closed, there's discrimination for who is welcome to be in it and who isn't? Um, as the unhoused population grew and grew in that park, and there was a kind of an almost like a conflict between people that were compassionate about it and people that were sick of seeing their park look like that, and trying to have that conversation, make everyone feel like they had a voice. I think that was our biggest challenge in trying to get parks to be open to listening to what we had to say and maybe think about addressing it a different way. I think one of our biggest successes this year as an eco district was Aaron and I just began speaking with someone from Parks every week. And we just kind of called them up and said, can we meet with you every week for half an hour to check in? And there would be times where our conversation was about the Black Lives Matter garden and the fact that everyone wanted that removed because it's in a prime location. And our opinion just being, why don't the other people that want to use that prime location, why don't they move? And why don't we stop thinking that this land is only to the people that have claimed it? So we had some really good conversations about that, and I think we actually gained support from the Parks District for trying to help us preserve that garden for the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think also we were able to have some really good conversations about many of the unhoused people that were in the park and about how to um, provide better services, take some surveys, find out what they need, and start addressing with the city that sweeping is not the answer. Like, we've got to find some different, better ways. And we were watching people move from one park to another park. And while that might not seem like a clear racial conversation, if you look at the population that's homeless, it does become a racial conversation. And also talking to the police force about how they were speaking to members of the community and seeing if there were ways to change that and to actually feel like they were listening.
Were there certain partners that you worked with other community-based organizations in Capitol Hill that kind of became allies or advocates, or that you collectively work together, or is that part of what Eco Districts is doing?
I think that you see that a lot with small businesses, and they're a core for working together. There's the GSBA, that's a local organization in support of LGBTQ businesses, but they've really broadened their perspective. And I think really they always have had a broad perspective. Its membership is for businesses in the Capitol Hill and kind of citywide area that are LGBTQ friendly, so not necessarily LGBTQ owned. And I think that they went out of their way to just express different voices and pull different people in to multiple conversations. I think that we also saw that with CAPA, the Cal Anderson Park Alliance. When I first was asked to join that group just as a member of the Eco District, and I just kind of sat on it and I thought this group seems a little out of touch with what's really happening at the park. And so we've been trying, and Aaron's a huge advocate for that, trying to get them to have more community folks involved, which has been great. I think we see that a little bit with some of the smaller organizations. We've been trying to talk to some of our steering committee members about taking a look at our renters initiative, not that it's defunct, but just to try to maybe re-energize it, especially as we look at possibly coming out of the eviction moratorium and trying to address, what kind of advocacy we're going to have for renters, for small businesses, for open space, and also just looking at greenways and street prioritization to make sure that we're not leaving voices out of that room. There's a lot of people that just don't feel welcome at meetings like that. So to try to make it clear, like, this is your city, and yes, you can attend these meetings, and your voice is actually not just welcome, but valued.
I'm wondering what projects really that you all have targeted to advance the equity issues, and then which ones, are there certain ways that you measure impact of those projects?
That question, as you can probably tell from my expression, brings such great joy to me because one of our biggest projects, of course, is public life planning. But what we have found is kind of historically a component of the environmental movement is that it's very, even though it sometimes feels like it's a grassroots or community organized movement, it feels very white, very liberal, very elite, almost like you have to have a certain socioeconomic level to be able to participate in it. Who has time to recycle when you're worried about putting food on the table? Who has time to think about green canopies when you don't have a home? And so trying to make it clear to people that this movement can be much wider and much greater and much more inclusive. It's one of the things that we've been really focused on, which is kind of a subset of the public life planning, is we've been wanting to try to make either permanent or semi-permanent some of the temporary street closures from COVID. And one of our kind of sweet spot projects is looking at a street that's a half street, Howell, which is close to Seattle Central. So it's a half block in between Broadway and Nagel. It already looks kind of like a market street. And because SDOT has kind of changed their perspective on doing commerce in the streets, the Eco District wants to set up a kind of a market street pilot. But we want to make it look really inviting, and we also want to support small businesses that would participate. So our criteria has been to select small businesses that are BIPOC owned, LGBTQ owned, and also to create a space where we're actually helping them to participate in the pilot. So we've got a stipend for participants so that it's not one more, like hoop to jump through to be able to participate. So hoping that that kind of enhancement, enticement can bring businesses there and maybe make our temporary pilot a permanent streetscape. And then, maybe there's food there, maybe there's a night market. Hopefully it becomes not only fun, but also something that people want to duplicate.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And the list of businesses that we have are smaller businesses that really do cover just about every ethnic group as well as LGBTQ owned businesses. So I feel like there's also the sense of people that normally can't get access to a Capitol Hill location because the rent is a barrier. And so by inviting that kind of inclusion, I think we can maybe change the tone and also have people just start thinking, who are these businesses and why aren't they in the center of our city? And what can we do as consumers to bring more of them here?
Mhm. That's important for us to think about. So I think that's it. I mean, I really appreciate your time.